We'll go ahead and get started. I know there are a lot of people that are going to be joining shortly, but I want to welcome those of you who are here. We are so grateful for your presence and your eagerness to want to learn more about both and worship. So welcome. I'm going to go ahead and open us in a prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to the person that you really want to hear from today, Jason Moore. But let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for blessing us with the ability of technology to be together and to gather in your name. We ask you, Lord, to be with the people who may not be able to be here today, but who wanted to be here. And we ask that all of the words spoken here today are spoken in your name and for your glory. And we ask all of these things in your son's name. Amen. All right.
Amen.
I'm gonna turn it over to Jason.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Well, it is good to be with you again. I apologize if you were raring to go last week and we had to cancel at the last minute. I had a flat tire that took way too long to have repaired. And even though I was told several times, we'll have you out of here on time, it didn't happen. So I guess it wasn't meant to be last week. This conversation is going to be different than the last time we were together in that I am not going to spend all of the time talking to you, but I'm hoping that you will be talking to me throughout this time. I am going to do a little bit of a recap on what we talked about the last time we were together, but I want to give you 2 questions to consider while I'm doing that recap. So be thinking about answers to these questions, because again, this is more about you than it is me today. First question I want you to consider is, what is one thing that you maybe tried after both and, or something you've tried in hybrid worship? Doesn't necessarily have to be something that you learned from me. And did it work or did it not work? And then if you don't want to answer that question or you haven't tried anything, you could say, what is one thing that you look forward to trying that you learned during both and, or you've learned about hybrid worship? So that's number 1. Question number 2 is, what is one thing that has arisen in this last year that didn't exist in ministry prior to the pandemic that really excites you about the next season of ministry? You know, there are lots of things that just sprung up a year ago. And I'll tell you, every one of these 30-day follow-up calls I've had have produced some incredible gold nuggets. So I hope that you'll be willing to share what you're learning and that we can all benefit from that learning together. I'm going to do, like I said, just a quick 10 or 12 or so minute recap to remind you. And if something occurs to you while I'm doing this, write it down. We're going to have conversation for the rest of our time together. So you might remember the first thing we talked about was that we need to reimagine worship for this season that we're in, that truly hybrid worship doesn't mean that we just put a camera in the room, but that we design worship in a way that's for people both in the room and at home, and that we're really intentional about that. We talked about the fact that when we move from book to film, there are some lessons that we can learn. We pretty much agreed that most of us don't like the film as much as we like the book, but it's not really a fair comparison. We've had centuries to work out our theology, methodology, polity, and so on for our online expressions of worship. We've only had a year to even consider what our rites and rituals are for online. And then the other huge advantage of this last year is that we've extended our reach. We have made the story available to more people than have been in the past. There are people who never walk into the bookstore and buy the book or check it out from the library, but when it becomes a film, that story is opened up to more people. And that's where we've been living. We talked about 2 lessons that book to film can afford us. One is that we have to consolidate the experience. Our attention spans are different in our living rooms than they are in our church buildings. We have a more controlled experience there. And we have the advantage of the stained glass windows, the woodwork, the stage, the moving lights, whatever kind of space you're in. That's an advantage. You get to control it, and the energy of the people and so on. We don't have that at home. So consolidating is important. I shared a quote with you from Nona Jones, who's the director of faith-based partnerships at Facebook and also a pastor in Florida. She says, keep your online worship, keep it tight, keep it interesting, keep it engaging, and don't go longer than 25 to 35 minutes. And she said at Facebook, they've studied the numbers. 40 is really the max when people start to tune out. Many of us have made those adjustments. Many of us do an hour or more in person, but we've discovered that online our attention spans are shorter. If you haven't quite made those adjustments, I want to encourage you to do that. Second thing we talked about is that we have to adapt some of our practices in worship. In the same way you have to adapt a story from book to film, you have to adapt the worship. We talked about the fact, and you all demonstrated in the chat. You may remember I asked, how many of you are worshiping at home in song in the same way you do in the room? You're singing. Most folks, about 80 or 90% of folks in all the trainings I've done. In fact, tonight I'm doing the 50th. I can't even believe it. The 50th both and worship for the New York Conference of the Methodist Church. In doing about 50 of these trainings, I have found that most folks are not singing at home, and you're the leaders. So that's probably true for our people at home. Am I saying don't do any singing? No, no singing at all. No, not at all. I reminded you that the lyrics don't lead themselves. So we can't treat the screens at home the same way we do in the room. If this is up for a really long time, you don't see a human face. So I remind you again that the lyrics don't lead themselves. The leader leads the lyrics. So doing things like lower thirds, or even using a screen where you can put the lyrics up for people. Basically, find a way to get the lyrics and the leader in front of the people at the same time. We talked about the need to adjust some of our practices in liturgical or traditional worship. People are accustomed to participating in calls to worship and responsive prayers and so on. How can we bring that same sort of energy to our online experience? I encourage you to have a PDF version of your bulletin or your print piece, or some digital worship order, so they can still completely participate and follow along with what you're doing. We also talked about the fact that not everything in the room translates, and we'll get to that in a moment. We talked about some adaptations we have to make where giving is concerned. In this season, people can't physically receive the offering plate, right? So we have to do online giving in this time. I encourage you to think about two things where giving is concerned. Teach people how to give, walk them step by step through it, and teach them why to give. I shared the quote from my friend and mentor, Mike Slaughter, who says, money follows mission, not church budgets. And I think this is so true. People want to be a part of transforming lives, not paying the utility bill. So it's important that we tell the stories of where our offering is going and how people can participate in that movement. We talked about the need to adapt the practice. If some of you were doing announcements up front, don't start with the least compelling thing, the easiest thing to turn off. Instead, start with an ROI. That's a return on investment. Over the course of the next 40 minutes, here's what you're going to experience, and lead them into the experience, give them a reason to stay. And then you might consider moving the announcements to the end and making those action steps instead of announcements, where you bring language to them that fits with your topic for the day. So here are 3 ways to live out finding your faith and fear this week. Number 1, and you walk them into it and tie it in so it feels like an extension of the sermon. We talked about the need to continue to iterate and innovate. My favorite thing about last year was watching you all do incredible things, innovating every single week. But if we weren't careful, we found a new groove that became a rut. I shared the quote with you from Clay Mathiel, who says, the only difference between a groove and a rut is how long you've been in it. Some of us found a new groove back in March, but we did the same things over and over and over and over and over. And those things became a rut. So we have to continue to innovate and iterate. I shared a quote from Carey Nieuwhof that I hope was helpful. Carey says, too many church leaders will step right back into the past the moment they step back into their buildings. The building represents safety and comfort. Friends, I told you, and I'll say again, we have to iterate forwards, not revert backwards. I encourage you, you might remember we took a look at some clips from the Tonight Show. We saw how Jimmy Fallon went from the studio to home and then back to the studio, but not back to what he did prior to the pandemic, but found a new iteration. I encouraged you all to think about starting a both and think tank at your church. The idea of a both and think tank is that you look at the worship you did prior to pandemic and say, what should stay from what we did before? What needs to go? Look at the worship you did during the pandemic. Say, what have we done online that needs to stay? What needs to go? Your next iteration should not look exactly like the previous 2, but should truly be another iteration. So friends, I hope that you'll consider that both and think tank. It's a critical time. If we go back to the old model where we just talk to the room, and if I did the entire conversation with you like this, you'd feel disconnected. We've got to remember that we have people both at home and in the room. We also talked about the need to properly prepare. And I talked you through 3 ideas that you need to talk through your plan together so there's a shared understanding. Actually take the time to walk through, go from item to item in worship, practice the transitions, and then pray it through. The Holy Spirit is your most important team member. Don't do this on your own power. You might remember I shared with you the most inspiring saxophone solo you've ever heard in your life, and I'm not going to play it again because I want you to stay. We also talked about the fact that we need to reimagine the experience of worship. I shared with you that we don't have a captive audience in the room. I'm sorry, we do have a captive audience in the room. We don't have one online. In the room, people will put up with a lot of things that maybe don't make a whole lot of sense or don't tie together. At home, it's simply a click on the window to close it. So I encourage you to ask 4 questions to create a more narrative approach to your worship. These 4 questions are: what is your driving scripture and what big idea does it present? And how can you capture that in the music, the spoken word, the children's sermon, if you do those, the announcements, the sermon, the adult sermon, and so on. What is the felt need you're trying to address for the people walking in or tuning in, and how does it relate to the scripture? The third big idea is: what is the hook, the narrative, metaphor, story, the creative element that makes it all hang together? And then finally, importantly, what is the goal of this experience? What do you want people to do as a result of it? If you don't name the goal for yourself, there's a pretty good chance people won't know what to do with it. And then we shifted our attention into 3 forms of both and worship. I shared that no matter what kind of church you are, small, large, technically savvy, rural, not technically savvy, lots of money, not a lot of money, one of these works for you. First one is what I call pre, both, and worship. This is the idea that you would have 2 completely separate experiences. The online worship would be for people online. The in-person would be for people in person exclusively. You're going to pre-record that online service. You're not going to stream at all during the in-person service. In fact, you won't even have cameras in the room. There are lots of upsides and downsides to all these models, but there are 4 considerations I gave you to think about. Number 1 is the service length. Nona suggests not more than 40 minutes. So when you pre-record, you include enough to kind of fit that time frame, and you're golden. Second thing is that we might reduce some of the singing as we pre-record our worship. I encouraged you to maybe include 2 of the songs you're going to sing, or 3, but then record all of them and post them as a separate file on your social media. And that way it can be the best of both worlds. If you love to sing, you can go to our Facebook page and find the entire song set that we sang in person today. I encouraged you all, pastors, to write the TED Talk version of your sermon. In addition to doing the full version when you're in person with folks, do that 18 minutes or less version that is really shareable. I also encourage you to take that sermon by itself, put it on your Facebook or YouTube page so that you can make it very shareable. Rather than me having to share the whole sermon or the whole service and point people to the sermon, I can just share the sermon and make it go viral. Last thing we talked about was the idea that we want to give people a call to action. I shared with you that I really believe we have to get away from the language of watching worship or viewers of worship. We want worshipers from home, not watchers of those who are worshiping in the building. We want participants. We don't want viewers. The only way that can happen is for us to give people something to do. We talked about the fact that our attendance patterns are shifting and people are starting to watch more on delay than they used to. And so I encourage you to think about creating evergreen content. That means that people might watch your sermon later and you give some language that will make sense for the context on the day that you're preaching it, will still make sense 6 to 8 months, a year, 2 years later. I encourage you to use recap language to walk people into where you're at. We talked about the importance of building relationships in our online worship, and I encourage you to have an online worship host. Here's a checklist. They should be articulate. They should be comfortable on camera. Those 2 things don't always go together. Understand technology at some level. Don't have to be a techno whiz, but they get a little bit of it. Available and willing to engage with worshipers. This means that they are not just an on-camera personality, but they are like the pastor for the congregation online. And then they should be in the know of the whole plan, what's going to happen in the sermon and the music and everything in between. My favorite thing about this season we're in is that we have moved from monologue to dialogue. It used to be one leader or leaders up front sharing an idea, and now we get to dialogue back and forth. you experienced this throughout the webinar in the chat. I encourage you to find ways to make people in the room and at home feel like they're a part of it, and so we can lean into that idea. We also talked about real-time both and worship, and this is the idea that you would design worship in a way that you're going to give attention to multiple audiences at the same time. This is going to happen live in the moment. You're live streaming. It may include a combination of live and pre-recorded elements. The best way to think of this is the difference between watching the football game at the stadium versus watching the game at home. They're two very different experiences. They're broadcasting the same game though. And so there are advantages and disadvantages to both. How do we deal with time? If you're going to do real time, how do you do both? I talked to you about two options. One is splitting the difference, doing a consolidated service. The downside with that is that when everybody has to compromise, people are not very happy about compromise. The people who are going to come in person, they want the full experience. The people online, they're only going to watch for so long. So this isn't my favorite option. The second option is my favorite option that I call the staggered approach. We talked about the idea that you might begin worship at say 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And then 10 or 15 minutes later, you might start your online worship, largely cutting out the music, the part where people aren't participating in the same way. After you sing song number 4, you welcome the online congregation and you sing song number 5, which is song number 1 for the online congregation, song number 2. We talked about giving the announcements as a page on your website and making them evergreen. And so cutting out 3 or 4 minutes of announcements and maybe even cutting the song of response. So you have an hour-long worship experience in person and a 30 to 40 minute service in the middle of that you get to kind of win in both ways in real time. We also talked about the idea that not everything translates in the worship experience. There are certain things that at home I feel like I'm just watching, sacraments, communion, so on. I talked to you about the idea of alternate moments. This is the idea that you do certain things for the online audience that the room would never see. So I talked to you about this example with book packs, backpacks, or book bags that church had that they bring up, they pray over them. And so I shared that you could do an alternate moment where you hold up a book bag in front of the camera and you talk to the online congregation while all that's happening in the room. The room is actually paying attention to what's happening, or you show a pre-produced video and so on and so forth. We talked about 4 congregations we have to meld together: the people that are in the room, the people that are at home that are connected to your faith community. You know these people. The people that are watching or participating from home that are not connected to your faith community. You didn't know they were coming. And then the growing number of people that are watching at a later time. So we talked about trying to do worship that is engaging for all of those audiences, participatory in multiple ways. So Palm Sunday, you might hand out palm branches to the people in the room. You might do send ahead kits to the people you know at home so they can do that. You might have a downloadable palm branch that people can cut out and participate with from home, and you might include that with your stream that people can watch later so they get to fully participate. And then finally, we talked about post both and worship. And that is the idea that you would do worship in the room live. You're going to record it with a future audience in mind. You're not broadcasting in real time. If you're in a small church, a rural church, a church with bad internet, this might be the one for you. This worship is captured, it's edited, and repurposed on delay. I probably shared with you, I think I was talking about them when I did your webinar. My favorite example of this is a church in my conference here in the West Ohio Conference. Their name tells you everything about them and maybe even yourself and whether you can pull this off. The name of the church is Farmersville United Methodist Church. They are most definitely not in the city. They are not tech savvy. They are not a big church. They don't have a staff. But what they do is at 9 a.m., they do their worship. They record that worship as it's happening live at 9 a.m. At 9:45 or 9:50 when the service ends, they take the sermon, a couple of the songs, put those into a video editor, which they already have some announcements and a couple of the liturgical elements ready, upload that. I think they even have to drive into the city, upload it, and by 11 a.m. you can watch the online worship. So you can either come in person at 9 or you can watch online at 11. General effectiveness tips. We're almost done. Speak to now. It's important that we give people Jesus in this moment, but also hold that intention with evergreen so that people understand the context. build an intentional chat strategy and digital hospitality team. So we don't want our online worship to be devoid of hospitality. We want to welcome and build relationships. Use social media, hashtags. Watch parties actually just went away, but we've got to share our church online with folks. And then finally, we have to create a plan to connect so that we're actually building relationships and we don't have a revolving door. The very final thing I shared with you is what I call the both and audit. And that is, first, before we get into that, I wanted to encourage you to assign advocates for both the online experience and the in-person experience. 7 questions that can guide your conversation. What is the purpose of this aspect of worship? And does it translate to both audiences? Does this moment belong in both experiences? Is there a participatory or interactive way of doing this? We'll always have watchers or viewers if we don't make it participatory or interactive. Is this too short or too long for either audience? How does this translate on screen, at home, and do we need an alternate moment? Does this need any additional contextualization for either audience? Keep in mind at home, you can't see the room, so you might need to give context. And then finally, how will a first-time viewer or in-person guest receive what we're talking about today? And then I gave the final word to Carrie Newhoff, who says that right now, pastors are using online to bring people to the building. In the future, pastors will use the building to get people online. Okay. So considering it took me 2.5 hours to say that the last time, that was actually a lot faster. I hope that that reminds you of some of the lessons that you learned. We're going to get back to those questions I asked you. I see some of you have joined while I was doing that, so you haven't heard these questions yet. So I'm going to give them to you now. First question I want you to consider so that we can have some dialogue is what is one thing that you tried since we did the both and training, and did it work or did it not work? And if you can't answer that question, maybe you haven't tried anything, you might instead say something that you look forward to trying. There's something I can't wait to try, and here's what it is. The second question I want you to consider is what is one thing, one opportunity that has arisen in this last year that you're excited about in ministry? So it's going to be, if you don't mind, it'd be great if you turn your cameras on for this part of the conversation. You don't have to, but turn your cameras on and then raise your hand and I'll unmute you as you have things to share. So it looks like some of you are going to be shy today, and that's okay. No problem. All right, Laura, you are going to get us kicked off. Go ahead. What do you got for us? Thank you for breaking the ice.
Of course, why not? I think what we tried early on, because none of us are tech savvy at all. And so we actually had our pianist, her husband is not a member of the church, but he came in for like the first year back in March and set up the computer with this nice, fun software, with all the slides and all of that. Well, what we found out when he stepped away from it in March of this year, because he'd done it for a year out of, just pleasure for him because he loves computers. But then it was just too technical for us.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it was during your seminar or another one that I've been on, because I've been on so many, I can't remember at this point. But during this time, somebody said, well, it's easier sometimes just to pull up your tablet and use that on Sunday morning, or pull up your phone and just use it. So it gives a different viewing and it's a more personal than having all those slides going through. And so since March, we have done that now, just presenting the service, as it is, without those slides, and worrying about, are the slides in place when they need to be, and all of that. So we've had a better, I think, connection with having that.
Good.
That human connection like we are right now versus having the slides going. So, I mean,
Yes.
but I've seen both. And so, but that's
Yeah.
one thing that we did, and then we had to redo it. So.
Awesome. Yeah, we did talk about the idea that the longer your graphics are up on the screen, the more disconnected you start to feel from folks. And I also encouraged you all to get the camera as close as you can.
Mhm.
So these shots where people are like this big and head to toe, if you can't make out facial features on the people that are leading worship, you feel very disconnected from them, which is something I think we all have to consider. And then, of course, as you've seen me demonstrate many times, also, if I'm not looking at the camera and if I'm looking off camera, you feel pretty disconnected from that as well. Thank you, Laura, for sharing with us, getting us started. Who else has got something that, Chris, your hand went right up. What do you got for us?
I do the unmuting. I thought you were unmuting. Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
So obviously Tech Savvy is still not quite within my reach yet. You know, the irony was a full year before the pandemic hit us, a full year to the month. I asked our sound guy, who is 20 years old, I'm in a retirement community, so most everybody is well beyond this, to give me a wish list. What would it take to get us online, and how could we reach out? At that time, primarily for at-home members was our primary interest at that time. He wrote a list together. It's a full-page legal pad. It's still in my desk drawer. It was $7,900, and he said, "This is where we start." And I said, "Well, this is probably where we end." That was a whole lot more than what we were thinking about. A year later, in that first week, I pulled that sheet out and I called him and I said, "Which parts of these do we need right now to get started?" And as a result of the both and conversation last month or so, we are now taking one computer, and we now have, you know, the two monitors, and we're adding a second camera in to really create that understanding of the importance of that digital presence. And I've been very surprised, overwhelmed, gracious, I mean, just with such gratitude of a congregation that says this reach that we now have is not just an afterthought. We have to take intentional steps to grow and to do what we need to do. And like Laura, part of our challenge is finding people who can understand the tech. But we've got a process in place right now that is easy enough that, I mean, the way I describe it, if me and the music guy can figure this out, you got this, you know. And we're working to train a full team so that we don't have a Sunday show up that someone's ill or out of town and, oh, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
We're creating that team approach. And this has kind of given us the courage to not just do the bare minimum of getting a camera going for a live stream, but also looking at how can we acknowledge the sacredness of this new community that's a part of our parish now.
Chris, I love the way you put that last piece there. I was talking with a denominational leader in another conference when we were setting up our both and she said something that I wrote down and I've been sort of quoting her on. She says, we have to figure out what our rites and rituals are for online worship. We know what they are for in-person worship, but the way that last statement you made just fed right into that. I love that. Yeah, that there's sort of a sacredness to this new experience that we have to figure out. And it doesn't all translate one-to-one. You know, there's a difference between what you feel in the room and what you feel at home. And I love just the intentionality you're bringing to what you're doing. Also, what a great opportunity. This is one of those opportunities where that equipment list didn't seem like it was the right priority, didn't seem like we could come up with the money. And the moment the pandemic hit, it was like we reprioritized and this opportunity arose and we met it. And so that's one of the things that's excited me. And I guess the final thought I would share, just reflection on what you said there, is, and I've been hearing this all across our connection and even outside of the United Methodist Church, people our congregations are more malleable than they've ever been. You know, it used to be that especially if you're using technology, if you made a mistake, man, that was an opportunity for them to like chalk it up. You know, they put a plaque on the wall and point at it every time you want to do something different and say, no, Pastor, remember on this date, you did this thing that really was terrible, you know, or whatever. We've been in this season though, where our congregation is like, hey, it didn't work, but good try, Pastor. Let's try the next thing, you know? And you're experiencing that, and you're in a retirement community. Sometimes when you're in an older community, you've got those folks that are, it almost feels like they're rooting for you to fail when it comes to some of this technology type stuff. And it sounds like that has not at all been your experience, which I think is also really cool.
We send teams out to homes. We've been doing this for 14 months now, setting tech up in homes.
Awesome.
A lot of these folks had iPads, had computers. They were connected just so they could see the grandkids.
Yep.
We've taught them how to use Zoom and how to do all these other things, and it has been a wonderful outreach tool.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm writing that down so I can share that with other people in the future. I love that. Sending teams. So what does that look like? Is that like just a group from your church, or how do people sign up? What is that? What does that entail?
So we set up a basic conversation, and I gave a pitch to the congregation and just said, hey, if you know where the on button is on your computer, and you are not afraid of a camera, and you know just a little bit about setting up or downloading an app from the internet, I need your help. I had 2 or 3 that jumped up and called me that same day, and I had a couple more call the next day. I called one person out because it became very apparent they weren't sure what the difference was between an app and the front door of their house. I mean, they didn't get that. And I brought them down here to the church, and we gathered here in my room, in my office. I've got a computer, I've got a TV screen, I've got the light. I mean, we're doing all of this stuff now that I'm still not fully appreciating, I guess, but we walk through it as a group on the big screen. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. This is as easy as it gets.
Yeah.
And then we invited people. If you want to get connected for Sunday school or for your Bible study, we've got someone that can come in. We'll be masked, a face shield. I mean, back then it was really cautious. You know, I even had them wear gloves when they go into the house to work on their computers.
Yeah.
We'd set them up. So all they would have to do is hit our email address, click the link, and they were in. It was really an easy process.
Awesome. That is so cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's one of those gold nuggets I was talking about that come out of these conversations. If you all haven't considered setting up a team of people to go out and help your congregations with technology, simple setups, that's a really wonderful idea. Anybody else have anything that you've tried? Or David, go ahead.
I'm retired, so until recently, I've been worshiping online for a year. And I noticed my concentration is much more challenged. So I wonder if you could expand on how in preaching virtually, you minimize the viewer's lack of concentration. That's a negative way to put it. How do you get them to concentrate better on the worship experience? You know, what can you do from behind the camera to help minimize distractions? I find, you know, I'm worshiping, but I'm also filing my nails or doing email, and sometimes the chats get off topic and
Sure.
okay.
You know, I think that's a certainly something we have to think about. The truth is, though, at least for me, I, even as a kid in church, could find distraction in the moment. You know, I doodle on the offering envelopes when the sermon didn't quite reach me. Or I hate to even admit this, but I've been in church before. I'm counting ceiling tiles above me.
It's exactly what I was going to say. I used to count the holes in the ceiling tiles.
Yes. So, you know, I've heard some people say this idea that people are bringing phones into church creates all these new distractions. Well, yeah, but distractions have always existed. So I think a lot of it goes into that section I talked about, those 4 questions. How do you create an experience where it feels like you're telling one narrative through the sermon that connects with the spoken word that connects? So it feels like, I mean, we don't have that problem when we go to a movie, right? When you go to a movie, you're not getting your phone. I mean, most of us anyway, aren't getting our phone out and checking our texts and our emails during the movie because we're so engrossed in the story that you don't want to miss a part of it.
And you're in a dark room.
And you're in a dark room. That's certainly true too. But I think if we're not careful, we have very disjointed worship where it's easy to get distracted and we don't, I call them off ramp opportunities. Clark, do you have a thought to contribute?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm going to push back a little bit on the movie thing. I go to movies as often as I can. And one of the reasons I go to movies is that I'm a bit of a rule follower in that I do turn off my phone. I do unplug, and I can do that in a movie theater. If I'm watching a movie at home, that doesn't happen. I'm more distracted about what's going on. I think though that there is a problem here because I think a lot of students and people are encouraging. I mean, we're seeing the signs of this pandemic as far as remote learning has been, that, you know, for most people, it's not an effective means by which for people to learn and be engaged, because staring at a screen for any length of time after a while they're just not as engaged as they are if they're in the classroom. That being said, I'm not willing to abandon the idea that there are things that we can't do to keep people engaged or encourage engagement. And I think it's just finding the right sort of, the right tools to do that. This past Sunday, one of my daughters had to stay home because she'd been in close contact and needed a quarantine till we could get her tested and she could go back to school. But having been in the room with her when we were watching ourselves during the pandemic, I know that she's more likely to be looking at her phone than looking up at the screen. So I wanted her to make sure she was worshiping with us. So I told her, I said, one, I need you to be in the living room watching on the screen. And at some point in time in the service, I'm going to say your name. I'm going to work it in somehow. I'm going to say your name, and you have to be able to tell me when that happened when I talk to you later, so that I know you were there and you were engaged, so that she didn't check out. And of course, I waited close to the end of the service, but there you go. But I think doing things that, I did this in one church well before we did online worship. And I don't know that it's a sustainable thing to do, but occasionally it can be effective. But I was actually encouraging young people to bring their phones into service because I knew many of them would anyways. And so I would say, hey, I'm going to offer up a secret word, and it's only for people who are under the age of 18. And if I say this word at the service and stuff, and you're the first one to text me this word or this thing, then, I'll have a gift card for you or something like that. So I'm not above bribery. But again, it's not something you can do. I think it's not a sustainable thing, but it's something you could do occasionally. And that may be something that could be done to help people stay engaged online. Certainly it works in the sanctuary, and, so.
Clark, good reflections there. And Leewood, I'll come to you in just a second. So I think you're right. It is different in your home watching a movie. I do play on my phone while I'm watching a movie in my living room, but I also can pause and rewind. And, if I didn't catch something, which happens a lot when I'm watching a movie and like, I am looking at my email, like, wait a minute, what did he just say? And so I'd rewind or whatever. But I do think those moments of engagement that are intentional do keep people engaged. So when you ask a reflection question in the chat, put your answer to this question. And then if you leave room to actually talk about it in the sermon, you might remember the example I shared with you of the pastor who did a whole series on questions and answers. And he said, you can write it down on paper if you're here in the room and hand that in, or text your question, or messages from home. And then he left room in the sermon to talk about it. People stay engaged throughout. I also think that what we do with our shot selection makes a big difference too. So again, if you're this big on screen and I can see you head to toe, I'm going to get really distracted versus when we're in a Zoom call. Have you ever been in a Zoom call? This happens to me sometimes when I'm in a Zoom call and somebody's like, I'm talking to them, but they're like doing this, maybe they're looking at their phone or whatever. And even though they might be listening to you, it doesn't feel like they're listening to you. The same thing I think is true in our worship. If you're watching worship and the whole time I'm like looking over here and I don't ever make eye contact with the camera, it starts to get a little distracting and you feel like, well, this isn't really for me. This is for somebody else. So I start filling my time with other things. Well, I'm going to go ahead and check my email or whatever. So I think the more intentional we are to create an experience that has that sense of dialogue, that back and forth, that phone becomes a tool to keep people engaged rather than them become disengaged. Now, some people are still going to like do their crossword puzzle or, play Angry Birds or, what I drew on offering envelopes, as a kid. But the more intentional we make the experience, the better. Leewood, what was your thought you wanted to contribute there?
Well, I wanted to say that in the first seminar, I thought it was a very interesting idea of engagement with the online community mixed in with the in-person. And I may have gotten this somewhat wrong, but from what I remember, it sounded like, you had the pastor invite those that were in person to pull out their phones like during a song to say hello to those that were had registered or checked in online. And so you purposely gave those at home some kind of engagement with those in person. And there was, it was just during the duration of a song, and maybe there was not quite as much singing, but it definitely brought those that, that wouldn't be there in person and made them feel a little more engaging. And I don't know how often, how frequently you would want to do that, but I definitely thought that was an interesting idea as one way to get those that can't be there in person for whatever reason to feel engaged and like, they were involved with everything else. The second thing, this is a different topic, but one that we started experiences once we opened up and got people coming into our sanctuary. We've started noticing that our shot selection is no longer what it was, because I'm at the tech position and I've got two cameras, a wide shot and then a close shot, both within arm's reach of me. Well, now the back of heads start popping in and blocking your shots. And so there's been a couple of times where I've not really taken a shot because I'm like, okay, there's somebody who probably doesn't want their thinning hair, blasted all over the online presence. So I didn't take the shot out of that respect. And so we were fortunate enough that we've had a couple of brainstormers on our tech end of things find a pan and tilt mechanism that's like a third party that we're going to now mount on this little pony wall that's right above us and elevate our cameras with some extension cables on, being able to pan and zoom so that we can get it out of my reach, but we're still going to have some control over the cameras. And I think that's really going to elevate the service back to the great portion that it was before we became in person, but now also allow people to be in person. So we've got that and we don't have to worry about where anybody's sitting. And so it's just going to, I think, move us forward a little bit more.
Yeah, good stuff. And Dan, I saw your hand go up, so I'll come to you in just a sec. Yeah, I called that the digital passing of the peace. I have some churches that are doing that weekly now, where they actually say, if you're in the room, go ahead and take your phones out. Those of you at home, you're watching maybe on your phones, mute your phone, but navigate to our Facebook page. If you're worshiping with us online, you're already on Facebook, but go ahead, take out your phone, navigate down to that chat, and let's greet one another right now in the name of Christ. We're worshiping together, both in this room and at home. So let's greet one another now in this time. And I've had so many churches tell me that has been really meaningful for the people at home who get to see the names of their friends at church and vice versa. One more thing I'll share, and then I'll get to you, Dan. I've got a pastor friend in Savannah, Georgia, who told me he's kind of moved to something he's calling breaking the fourth wall. Some of you know what that means in television and film. The actor will turn to the camera and talk. So like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ferris might say, what Cameron doesn't know is this is going to be the best day ever. And then he goes back into the scene. So this pastor said, what I have been doing is for like communion. He said, I'll do the communion liturgy and then I'll invite people to come forward and receive communion. He'll say, the table is open, so come now and receive communion in these moments or whatever. And he said, I have a microphone that is like, my lapel or my countryman that's by my face. He said, they'll turn that mic off, but keep the mic on that is for the online community. And while people are coming to receive communion, I'll turn to the camera and they'll turn this mic off, but leave this one on and say, excuse me, friends, we are engaged in the act of Holy Communion here in our building today. That is called a sacrament. And what a sacrament is, and so he does a lot of explanation. He said, I can actually see what's happening in the room. So I don't want them to feel disconnected. I'm breaking the fourth wall and I'm talking to them and saying, I can remember one of the most powerful communion experiences I ever had. I took a trip to the Holy Land and we took communion right on, whatever. He's telling us. And so I can see what's happening. He said, all right, friends, let's rejoin the room here in this moment. And he'll say, let's pray together now, after communion is over. And what he's done in that moment is he's made the people in the room feel like they're a part of it and the people at home. I'm talking to you, you're with me. He said, it's an adjustment for all of us, but that's been a good thing. One final thought is that in our traditional sanctuaries, I don't know if I said this when we were all together for the training, but as we come back together in worship, what you've done for this last year, most likely, if you've been worshiping from home or even in your churches, is you've been able to have that camera right up in front of you. So there's a close-up. Now, if you all represent the people in the room and this is my camera, here's the problem. Now I can't put the camera right in front of my face because now your congregation can't see you. So we're going to have to think about where are we going to put the camera so that we still get close-ups. I would recommend that your shots are, for the most part, this close or closer, but not further away from that for the majority of your shots. It's still okay to show the whole room, show people coming up for communion, all that as like a cutaway to establish the space. But the majority of your shots need to be close enough that I can see facial expressions and facial features and so on. So that may mean that some of us have to invest in like a camera that will zoom or a long throw lens. I also think that whereas in the past, people would have complained if you had a camera within eye shot of any of the seats in the sanctuary, I think people will remember that we've had a year where we only could worship at home, and you can get away with putting those things a little closer than you used to. I think people would have complained before that you're marring our sanctuary, but now I think they may remember in a different way. Dan, go ahead. You had a comment.
Yeah, I just want to kind of touch on some of the things you actually just talked about. When we first, before pandemic hit us, we kept a little video camera in the back that we recorded all the services just for, posterity. And so Clark could do his sermon reviews for the end of the year for the conference. And then pandemic hit and we had that same little camera. We had to upgrade to kind of make things work for us. When we started doing pre-recorded services that we would upload, and then Clark and I would interact with the online congregation because we were done with the service, and then we could interact with them at a later time. Then this summer we went to live streaming. Well, I say this summer we started live streaming. Sorry, my year is all completely messed up, as everybody's probably. February, we started true live streaming. Well, Clark and I were no longer able to interact with our congregation because we were actively leading in-person worship at the same time. So we established virtual greeters for those services. And those are people that are in the church online platform and on the Facebook page that are interacting with people in the chats. And they even sit in the sanctuary in the in-person worship now and interact with our congregation. I like some of the ideas that we've mentioned today about getting the rest of our people in the congregation to get on their device and say hi. Right now, we just have them kind of turn around and wave at the camera to say hi to everybody who's worshiping. Going to your camera stuff that you were talking about, we upgraded from that little Panasonic camcorder to a PTZ optics camera that can zoom, pan, and tilt. And then we also paired it with a joystick controller that has presets. So now we have the ability to tap a button for a camera preset that will zoom in on the pastor, or pull out just a little bit and allow us to add a graphics window for his sermon notes, so it'd be over here on his side. Then we also have a setting that keeps the praise team set, but it focused in on the praise team. And then also a full sanctuary for, like, if we're singing a traditional hymn, we pull back so that the full sanctuary is shown. And that kind of helps us give us some variety, but we wouldn't be able to do it without that PTZ camera and the joystick remote. Yes, it's an investment, but it's so worth it.
Yeah. And, I think if we're going to invest money in anything right now, investing money in delivering a worship experience to people who might not be in our physical spaces is worth it. You know, it's now more than ever, what we're doing with online worship, I think matters. Even those of you who are kind of online pre-pandemic, I think most of our strategies have changed, where it used to be maybe about capturing just the experience for posterity. And now we know that we're reaching people even beyond our own cities. You know, some of us have people worshiping from multiple states and all sorts of things like that. So good stuff. Any other thoughts before we've got a little bit of time left? I want to make sure you get to any questions you have. David, what do you have?
For privacy reasons, our pastor no longer talks about who's in the hospital, who's sick, etc. Speak to that for a minute.
So when it comes to things like prayer requests and joys and concerns and all those sorts of things, I do think we have to consider privacy. First names are probably okay, but another thing we have to consider is when we're shooting worship, are we including shots of people in the worship moment? Some folks don't want to be on camera.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah. So when I was on staff at a church in Ohio called Ginghamsburg, David or Dan, I'll get to you in just a sec here. We were all, and then Clark, we always were intentional about only shooting folks up front because they chose to be there and not people in the congregation. We don't want to violate their worship experience. We didn't want them to feel like self-conscious that a camera is pointed to them. So I don't mind shooting backs of heads so much, but we try to keep the camera focused in the other direction. I had one church in one of these follow-up conversations tell me that they have decided to put all of the joys and concerns in the chat and not actually speak any of it aloud. And that still allows everybody to participate. Keep in mind that joys and concerns and prayer requests, you know, those kind of things, for an outsider often feel a little weird. Like, who are all these people we're talking about? And we go on. And sometimes, I mean, I've even been in churches where those things almost sound like more like gossip than they do actual prayer requests and stuff. You know, pray for, you know, Brother Bill and his addiction to, you know, alcohol again, you know, whatever. Like, it feels like, oh man, that's not something we want to maybe broadcast. So I think first names only. I think we got to be careful about what we do with how we shoot. And you might even consider just saying, now I would invite you in the chat to lift up any joys and concerns that you have, and not even have those be kind of formally in the broadcast part of the service. One other thought I just want to share that occurs to me that I didn't talk about back when we were together is that you've got some folks now who are worshiping on a smart TV or a tablet device or something where they don't get the chat. If we're intentional with chat can actually be a really great way to enhance the worship experience that people can participate. So one thing you might consider is if saying something like, if you're worshiping with us from home today and you're worshiping on a smart TV or a device that you can't see the chat, I want to encourage you to maybe on another device, open up the chat, and you can use something like this. This is a QR code. This is actually a QR code to download the handbook for my seminar. But you can put your phone up to that in the photo app, and it'll automatically load the link, which will then load on your phone. So that would mean that you can invite people into chat, even if they're watching from a smart TV. So we just put a QR code on the screen. If you'd like to chat along with us today, if you'd like to ask questions, submit your prayer requests, and fully participate, we want to invite you to do that. Okay, Dan, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Clark.
I was going to address the concerns that David had and some of the things that you said. First of all, we use QR codes. We've used them a couple of different ways already. We have a online Connect card that we invite people to fill out for the service. And we have QR codes in the pews so that they can grab it with their camera. And then we also usually put up links for our online so that they can grab it as well. And those work pretty good, although I wish we had more participation in that. Some folks just like to attend church anonymously. But as to the concern about prayer concerns, we realized pretty quickly in our online service that taking joys and concerns the way we originally did doesn't translate well to the online audience, because Our pastor of children and families would lead the joys and concerns section. He would ask the congregation if anybody had any joys and concerns, and people would raise up their joys and concerns, but they weren't mic'd, so nobody in the online service could hear anything that was going on. So it just didn't translate well. So what we did was we started taking our pastor will go out to the congregation during the 5-minute pre-service countdown, which I know is controversial, Jason, because you said some places say don't do a countdown. But we use that countdown as a time for Manny to go out and circulate among the congregation and take joys and concerns that way that he can then lift up during the service. And so basically, if somebody doesn't lift a joy or concern, it doesn't get mentioned. Also on that Connect card, we have a checkbox for when people can write joys and concerns in that Connect card entry, and they check on the box whether they want it shared with the congregation or whether they just want the pastoral staff to pray for them. So those are a couple of things that we kind of address that.
That's great. Let me go to Clark and then Leewood.
I was basically going to share what Dan said as far as what we're doing with that. I will say one thing about the QR codes, and that is, I think they're, as much as a lot of us are familiar and comfortable with QR codes, we can't assume that everybody knows what a QR code is and how it works. Yep. And so, case in point, we had a member a couple of weeks ago. We asked people, hey, you can check in, let us know you're in worship with us. Just get your camera and your phone out, and you use the QR code, and that'll take you to our check-in. And this one member took a picture of the QR code and sent us the picture, says, I'm here. So not everybody knows how QR codes work, but she's a wonderful woman, but it does tell us, oh, you know what? We can't just assume that everybody knows what that weird looking thing is and how it works. So there you go.
Absolutely right.
And I was going to add on that, even beyond a QR code, Clark, because we are reaching people who know nothing about United Methodism, who do not know what a litany is, or communion, or, I hope that you will also take the explanation and the education that opportunity and include that in all of your online worship, because these people may have never been even churched before. And so to help it, not just walk through how to do a QR code. She was almost there by taking a picture, but to also explain so many other things that many of the people inside the building take for granted and already know. So just my
agree 100%. And I have a whole other training I do called 5 Things Your Visitors Are Thinking But Won't Ask. And it's all about sort of online and in-person hospitality. But we've got to give people orientation and explanation for all these practices. Even to say a Connect card, they don't know what a Connect card is. Are we going to play Connect 4 in worship? I like that old game with the checkers, or benediction. Isn't that the person that betrayed the army? What are these words? We have to give people language. Leewood, you have patiently had your hand up. What do you got for us?
I was just going to add that much like you mentioned earlier with your example of breaking the fourth wall by having a second microphone where the primary one was cut off to the in-house service, the Q&A or the joys and concerns could also be addressed the same way, to where you had another microphone facing all of your congregants. Just don't have it in your house mix, and that would allow you to take some of those questions or whatever someone's speaking and route it to the online community without it, causing feedback, because everyone in the room will likely be able to hear the person anyway. So that could be another way to do that as well.
Great idea, Leewood. Excellent. Well, friends, I don't mind hanging a few extra minutes if you have more questions. That doesn't bother me at all, but I also want to honor your time. So let me offer a final thought, and then we can keep going if you'd like to. First of all, Amy, thanks again for the opportunity to be with you all for both the webinar and this follow-up conversation. Grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to future equipping opportunities with you as well.
Thank you. The final thought I want to offer you this is this, friends. I have heard so many pastors and leaders say over this last few months, I'm exhausted. It's been such a tough year. You know, I didn't ever go to seminary. You know, those of you who are pastors, clergy, you had to learn how to exegete scripture and write a sermon and learn that sermon and then offer that sermon and record that sermon and then edit that sermon and then upload that sermon and then do all the other stuff that you have to do as a pastor. And I know like your congregation just thinks you work one day a week, but we all know that's not true. So first of all, friends, I just want to say, if no one's told you in a while, you are doing a great job. I think that the way you have met the culture in this last year and gone way out of your comfort zone has been incredible. So first of all, know that you're doing a great job. The second thing is that we need you. So don't spread yourself so thin and try and be, you know, all things to all people. And don't worry about, you might remember I talked to you about the idea that authenticity matters more than being perfect or slick. When the technology fails, Jesus is still Lord. When that thing that you planned and you had this great idea for how everybody's going to interact doesn't work, Jesus is still Lord. So I want you to rest on the fact that Jesus has got you one way or the other. You don't have to be perfect. Keep up the great work. You're doing really incredible things. So I just wanted you to hear that as sort of the final thought. Oh, and this is my final word, and that is this. If you participated in the both and training and you took notes and you say, oh my gosh, there's 5 things Jason said that we're not doing. We got to do all these 5 things. I don't want you to do 5 things. I want you to do 1 thing and do that and get comfortable with it and try that for a while and then do the second thing and do that for a while and get comfortable with it. If you try to do 5 things, number 1, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to make your congregation crazy if you try to do all that change at the same time. So pace yourself. You don't have to do this all at once. Jesus is still Lord, even if everything is not perfect. That is my final word to you. And again, I'll give the final word to Amy, and then if anybody wants to ask any other questions, I'm happy to hang for a few extra minutes.
You bet. Thank you. And thank you to our ministry leaders that have been here today. This has been recorded. This will be available to share with your worship teams. This will be available for people who were not able to be here today that so desperately wanted to. I also want to let you know that we will be working with Jason to bring additional equipping opportunities for you. And so just hang in there. We're so grateful for your ministries. We acknowledge your having to feel like you're now doing double what you were doing 2 years ago, and we see you, but we also see the great works and the great ministry of sharing the word of Jesus Christ with your community. So thank you from Bishop Mueller, who could not be here today, that wanted to be here and speak to everybody and say hello. I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to everyone. And so anyway, we'll hang out for a few minutes if you would like to, if you still have more questions.
I'll also remind you that you still have access to the recording. So if you want to watch both and I think Amy and I need to talk, but I think we're going to extend that so you have it for a longer period of time.
Right. Right.
And you might even share that with your team if you'd like to. So if they didn't get to watch with you, you might show them, half an hour at a time. Don't make them sit through the whole 2.5 hours. There's one other tip I want to give you that occurred to me that I didn't say earlier that came out of one of these conversations, something for you to consider. And that is, if you have never taken the time to watch your worship from the beginning to the end after you've done it, I want to encourage you to do that at home with your team. So you may find some spots where you're like, oh, well, that wasn't as engaging as I thought it was, or gosh, I really never did look at the camera, or we could have asked that question and let people respond to it and talked about it. the thing is you all are so wrapped up in the development of your worship and the deployment of your worship that oftentimes you don't get to experience what your people experience. So I want to invite you to consider that in your own setting. And Monday morning quarterback, what things did you do really well? Can we do more of that? And what things, well, we could probably tighten those transitions up a little bit. Look at yourself so you can get better.